The phone speaker hissed, and then my father's voice snapped through the static like a whip. "Randy needs that house more than you do, and if you don't sign it over by Friday, we'll see you in court." His words hung in the air, sharp and heavy, but across the table my attorney, Julia Morse, burst into muffled laughter, hiding her smile behind her hand. What was meant to scare me into surrender had somehow become the spark of something else entirely. The opening move in my freedom story, and the first crack in the wall of their own downfall. Hi everyone, I'm Beverly. I'm 34, and I've learned the hard way that sometimes the quietest way to win a war is simply to let your enemies pull the trigger first. If you've ever stood toe-to-toe with a family who believes you exist to serve their comfort, buckle in, because today justice isn't just coming. It's arriving frost-covered and grinning. Julia cleared her throat and leaned closer to the speaker, her navy blazer crisp against her shoulders. "Mr. Harrison, this is Julia Morse, counsel for Beverly. I should tell you this call is being recorded, and we've noted your threat of litigation. On what grounds exactly? Do you plan to sue your own daughter for possession of a property she legally owns?" Silence, the kind that crawls around a room, thick and crawling. Then, predictably, my mother Gloria's sharp voice pierced through, high and indignant. "She knows what she owes us. We raised her." Before she could finish, Julia cut in, tone as smooth as silk stretched over steel. "Raising a child is a duty, Mrs. Harrison, not a debt account. Please, by all means, proceed with your lawsuit. It's been far too long since I've had this much legal comedy in my week." The line went hot with my father's furious sputtering before it finally clicked dead. The laughter vanished from Julia's face as she turned to me, her look suddenly serious. "They're going to regret this, Beverly," she said, "but you need to be ready for what's next." I took a slow look around my living room, trying to anchor myself. The exposed brick I had scrubbed clean by hand, the old hardwood floors now glowing like warm honey, the broad bay windows catching the sunlight over the garden I'd coaxed from weeds and gray soil. This wasn't just a house. When I bought this 1920s Craftsman 5 years ago, it was written off as a lost cause, a ruin, something only a demolition crew could love. But I saw what it could be, just like I'd learned to see something in myself even when my family only pointed out the cracks. To rebuild this place, I'd traded nearly everything. Every spare dollar, every weekend, every second of peace. I'd stripped wallpaper until my fingers bled, learned plumbing and wiring from endless nights watching tutorials until my eyes blurred. I'd spent holidays alone because family events always turned into lectures about how I was throwing my life away on a broken house while my brother Randy needed help. Always Randy. Forever the favorite. 3 colleges dropped, 2 cars wrecked, a mountain of loans vanished like smoke, and still, he was their bright star. The same brother who once laughed at my fixer-upper until his friend, the realtor Charlotte, casually mentioned that the neighborhood was suddenly high demand and prices had tripled. That's when everything changed. Overnight, my house stopped being Beverly's silly project and magically became family property. Suddenly, I was the selfish one, hoarding what they thought should have been shared. "I've been training for this moment without knowing it," I told Julia, my voice steadier than my heartbeat. She smiled faintly, flipped open her laptop. "Then let's sharpen our swords, shall we? The deed is solely yours, right?" "Yes," I said, pulling out my folders. "Paid with my own savings. No co-signers, no family money." I scrolled through my phone, showing her 5 years of photos, the cracked ceilings, the patchwork walls, the nights I slept under tarps, the polished glow of the final result. I turned a $140,000 wreck into a $500,000 home. All by myself. Julia's eyes glimmered. "And your parents' contribution?" That question hit like a punch I should have seen coming. "Their contribution," I said softly, "was calling me insane. My mom told me I'd die alone in a rotting money pit. My dad offered to help find me a nice apartment instead." "Perfect," Julia murmured, typing quickly. "Now about that trust fund issue you mentioned. Ah, yes. The secret that had kept me sleepless for weeks. The quiet heart of all this rot." I pulled out a worn folder, edges soft from being handled too often. My grandmother, Martha, my father's mother, had left trust funds for both Randy and me. Equal shares. We were supposed to access them at 25. But I never saw mine. I was told that Grandma changed her mind before she died, that she'd been disappointed in me and cut me from her will. I remembered the shame like it was fresh, how I'd sat in my car crying, convinced I really had failed everyone I loved, that I deserved nothing. Then, last month, at Randy's engagement party, with his dazzling fiancée Grace on his arm and a glass of champagne in his hand, everything cracked open. Drunk and bragging, Randy laughed about how he'd already spent through his trust fund and how he'd need my house to keep Grace living the high life. I'd laughed back, brittle. Trust fund? What trust fund? He'd smirked, voice slurred with condescension. The same one you got, stupid. Then after a pause, he did that cruel little laugh I'd heard all my life. Oh wait, Mom and Dad said you blew yours fixing up that dump. Guess that's why you're so bitter. Julia stopped typing mid-sentence, her eyes narrowing. He said you got your trust fund? That's what made me start digging, I said. I hired a private investigator, Carlos. He found Grandma's real will. My hands trembled as I passed her the papers. Randy and I each inherited $200,000. Distributed when I turned 25, but I never saw a cent. The paper crackled in the quiet. My parents listed themselves as trustees, I continued. They handled the payout and paid themselves. They told me I'd been disinherited while stealing the money meant for me, all to prop up Randy's lifestyle. The joking light was gone from Julia's eyes now. Her gaze hardened, cool and certain. Her face was stone. This is fraud, criminal fraud. And now they're threatening to sue you for a house you bought with your own money while they stole your inheritance. That's not even the best part, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Juan found more. My parents have been claiming me as a dependent on their taxes for the past 5 years while I was fully employed and supporting myself. They've been collecting credits and deductions using my information. Tax fraud on top of inheritance theft. Julia shook her head. They really thought you'd never find out. They thought I was the same scared kid who believed them when they said I was worthless. The same daughter who accepted crumbs and called it love. The truth was, I might have stayed that person if they hadn't gotten greedy. If they'd been satisfied with stealing my inheritance, I'd have never known. But threatening to sue me for my house on Amy Blood, Sweat, and Tears' house had triggered something primal. So, Julia said, closing her laptop with a decisive click, here's what we're going to do. We're going to let them file their frivolous lawsuit. In discovery, we'll request financial records that will expose everything. Then we'll counter-sue for the stolen trust fund, file criminal complaints for fraud, and report the tax situation to the IRS. What about Randy? He didn't know about the theft. Ignorance isn't innocence. He benefited from stolen money and participated in trying to take your house. He's an adult who makes choices. And days later, my parents made good on their threat. I was served at work in front of colleagues because, of course, they wanted to humiliate me. My hands shook as I signed for the papers, feeling the curious stares of coworkers burning into my back. The lawsuit claimed I had promised the house to Randy, that I was holding family property hostage, and sought immediate transfer of the deed. That night, I sat in my kitchen. The kitchen I'd rented myself, where I'd cried over burned dinners while learning to cook alone, and read every word. Each lie felt like a slap. They painted me as a vindictive daughter, withholding rightful family assets, as someone who'd made promises I'd never made. Julia's response was swift and brutal. Our countersuit laid out everything. The stolen inheritance, the tax fraud, the attempt to steal property purchased with legitimate funds. We didn't just defend, we declared war. The family group chat exploded within hours. My phone buzzed incessantly. Aunt Martha. Beverly, how could you sue your own parents? Uncle Joe, this is disgusting. The family doesn't do this. Cousin Lucas always knew you were selfish. My chest tightened with each message. These people had watched me struggle, had seen my parents' treatment of me, and still they defended the lie. I typed one response. They stole $200,000 from me. The evidence is filed with the court.public record. Look it up. Then I left the chat, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. The real showdown came at what would be our last family dinner 2 weeks after the lawsuits were filed. My mother had summoned everyone to their house. The house I now realized my inheritance had probably helped pay for. The irony wasn't lost on me. I arrived with Julia and Juan, my investigator. The dining room was packed with relatives, all ready to stage an intervention. My parents sat at the head of the table like martyred saints. Gloria's eyes, already red-rimmed with tears. Beverly Shear? Someone whispered and the room fell silent. The hostility was palpable. I could feel it pressing against my skin. You came, my mother said, tears already starting. I knew you still had some family loyalty. I came to give you one chance, I said, not sitting down. My voice carried further than I expected in the hushed room. Drop the lawsuit, return my inheritance with interest, and amend your fraudulent tax returns. Do it within 48 hours, and I'll consider not pressing criminal charges. How dare you? My father started, his face flushing red. How dare I do that? I laughed, but it was sharp, bitter. Discover you stole me inheritance. Find out you've been committing tax fraud. Refuse to hand over my house to your deadbeat son? Randy stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm not a deadbeat. I need that house. Why? I asked, my voice cutting through the tension. Because you burned through $200,000 plus whatever Mom and Dad stole from me. Because your fiancé thinks you're rich and you can't admit you're broke. Grace went pale. What? Randy, what is she talking about? Juan stepped forward, placing a thick folder on the table. Financial records, he said simply. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison received $200,000 from Martha Harrison's trust intended for Beverly. The money was dispersed over 5 years into various accounts, including several in Rye's name. The room erupted. Relatives grabbed for the papers, voices rising in shock and anger. But not at my parents, at me. You ungrateful family business should stay. How could you embarrass? Enough. I slammed my hand on the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. You want to talk about family? The family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. The family doesn't threaten to sue for property they have no right to. My voice rose with each word. Years of suppressed rage finally finding its voice. You all sat here ready to guilt me into giving up my house. But where were you when they stole my inheritance? Where were you when they told me I was disinherited and worthless? Silence. The only sound was Grace quietly crying. That's what I thought. I looked at my parents. Really looked at them. My mother's tears had stopped, replaced by cold calculation. My father's righteous anger had morphed into naked fear. You have 48 hours. Drop the lawsuit, return the money, or face the consequences. We don't have it, my mother whispered. The money? It's gone. Then you better find it, Julia said, her voice like ice. Sell assets, take out loans, figure it out. Because the alternative is federal prison for tax fraud and state prison for inheritance theft. We left them there, surrounded by relatives who were slowly realizing they'd been defending criminals. Grace broke up with Randy that night. She sent me a message that made my chest tight with vindication. Thank you for exposing the truth. He told me his trust fund was in property investments. I almost married a fraud. My parents dropped their lawsuit within 24 hours. They hired their own lawyer who tried to negotiate, but Julia was a shark who smelled blood. We accepted a payment plan for Thestalin inheritance plus interest, required them to file amended tax returns, and got a legal agreement that they would never contact me again. The IRS penalties alone nearly bankrupted them. They had to sell their house, the own partially paid for with my money. Randy moved back in with them, High's engagement ruined, his reputation destroyed. The golden child, tarnished beyond repair, but the sweetest justice came 6 months later. I was sitting in my garden, the one they'd mocked, when a certified letter arrived. It was from my grandmother's estate lawyer, Caleb Morrison, who'd been tracking me down after seeing the lawsuit in public records. My grandmother had left me something else, something my parents couldn't touch. Her personal journals and a small separate account they'd never known about. In her journal, dated a month before she died, she'd written, I fear that my son and his wife will try to keep Beverly from her inheritance. They've always resented her independence, her strength. If you're reading this, dear one, know that I saw who you really were. The house you'll build with your own hands will be worth more than any money I could leave you. But take what's yours and build your life free from their shadow. She'd known. Somehow she'd known. The small account had grown over the years to nearly $50,000. I used it to pay off the last of my renovation loans and install the greenhouse I'd always dreamed of. My house stands now as more than just property. It's proof that sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to keep. That sometimes their rejection is just redirection towards something better. The relatives who sided with my parents faded away. Good riddance to bad blood, but others reached out. Cousins who'd been pushed away. Aunts who'd been labeled difficult for asking questions. I built new relationships on foundations of truth instead of obligation. Randy still sends occasional messages begging for help. I don't respond. My parents live in a small apartment now. Their golden years tarnished by their own greed. They thought they could sue me into submission. Thought the threat of legal action would make me crumble like I had as a child. Instead, their threat became my liberation. Julia was right to laugh. It was laughable. The idea that the people who'd stolen from me could use the law as a weapon. The law became my sword instead, cutting through years of lies to reveal the truth beneath. My name is Beverly Harrison, and I own my house free and clear. Not just the deed, but every brick, every board, every flower in the garden. I built it with hands they called worthless. With money they said I didn't deserve. With dreams they tried to steal. And when they threatened to take it all away, I didn't just keep my house. I brought theirs down around them. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just living well, it's living honestly with nothing left to hide and nothing left to fear. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to stand up to a family who tried to steal from you? Justice might be slow, but it's always worth the wait.